All right, I just wanted to welcome you quickly into our third week of this series for our midweek Bible study. We're going through the book of Ruth. Almost earlier when I was thinking it through, referred to it as the Gospel of Ruth. It's an interesting situation. If you're a pastor and you're used to trying to do things heading into Easter and you have all of your messages that are pointing to Easter Sunday, it can be sometimes difficult to go back and get a Bible study that lines up just perfectly with the Holy Week, so that the things we're talking about today are really things that reflect on Jesus, which would be ideal. And a lot of times that just doesn't happen. You're at the wrong spot of the wrong book or something, and you're talking about something. Of course, everything really is back to Jesus in some way, but today lines up perfectly. The third chapter of the Gospel of the book of Ruth is really ideal for Holy Week and talking about the things that we're going to be discussing today. And there's a few reasons for that. And what we'll have to do as we go through and read the things that we're reading, we'll have to talk about some of the background. But one of the background pieces that we're going to talk about today is the idea of a kinsman redeemer. And what you would see going back through the books of the law and how they set everything up is, if you had a woman, say I had a family with 6 or 7 brothers, which is not unheard of in that time, and one of the brothers died, whoever was his wife would then, in order for her not to be kind of a widow for the rest of her life, one of the other brothers would then come in, perhaps a cousin, somebody who was a kinsperson, kin to them in some way, would come in, and what they would do is they would marry that person, and then the kids that were had would be in the name of the fallen brother. So really what you were doing is giving up a chance to have children for them, and it was a self-sacrificing kind of thing. It was a selfless thing to come in and to redeem somebody who, because of the nature of their situation, was in a bad spot. When Ruth comes back, 2 brothers have died. That means that the other brother can't step in and take as his wife Ruth. And so the idea still remains. It's complicated in Ruth chapter 3 because Ruth is a Moabite woman. It mentions that over and over because it would have been a big issue. And here's the dilemma. If somebody were to marry Ruth and have her children for the sake of her husband who died, to carry on his name legally, his property legally in that environment, his heirs in that way, they'd have to do that by marrying not an Israelite, but somebody who was of foreign descent. And so what does that mean? What does that look like? How would that happen? And what are the kind of things that are going on? To understand the process fully, we need to understand that Jesus came in many ways. We're made in the image of God, Genesis chapter 1. Male and female, he created them in his own image. Is that Jesus steps up in his trip to the cross. The self-sacrificing nature that becomes a kinsman redeemer for us. So it's against that background that we read the book of Ruth, understanding that those in that day only knew that kinsman redeemer was a thing, but now we know that kinsman redeemer is a foreshadowing of what Jesus was to be for us. We see all of those things unfold in this passage of Scripture, and we're going to start reading in chapter 3, verse 1. We'll have to stop at some point and look back at chapter 2, because there's an interesting point where a lot of people are confused in this passage, because this passage reflects a culture that's not our own. And in order to understand it, instead of reading our culture into it, we have to say, well, what did that mean in their culture? What would it have meant for them to do that? And so let's begin looking at that right now. Naomi in verse 1 of chapter 3, her mother-in-law, this Ruth's mother-in-law, said, "My daughter, should I not seek rest for you, that it may be well with you?" So what she's saying is, the 2 of them have come back from Moab. They made a journey back to Bethlehem area, the land of Ephrathah. And what they're doing is, Ruth is going out every day working hard in the field to feed her mother-in-law, but they really don't have necessarily a home, a future. There's a lot of unsettled nature to that. So what she's saying is, should I not seek rest for you? And what we see happening is, in that time period, usually marriages were in some way, shape, or form arranged or helped out by the parents. Less so in our nature. Parents, a lot of times told, stay out of that. They let the person find their own mate. In those days, they would help out and they would say, oh, let's look around and find you the best mate. And so that was the situation with parents during this time. Now, okay, so Ruth's husband has passed away, and Naomi says, shouldn't I work in your behalf again? And so that you have rest, so that the unsettledness of their current situation has become settled. And then she says, is not Boaz our relative with whose young women you were? So she's recognized that Boaz has showed favor. Boaz is a kin. So we have the potential for a situation which a kinsman redeemer would show themselves. And then he says, see, he is winnowing barley tonight at the threshing floor. So they've been out, Ruth has, with his servants through the barley and wheat harvest. And what we see is that would have been usually March, April, May. And then once those things are in, then they go through the winnowing process, the threshing floor. That's maybe an explanation for another day. But so she says in verse 3, wash therefore, you usually see watch therefore, but it's wash therefore and anoint yourself. Anoint yourself is going to make yourself look tidy. There might have been some kind of put on some perfume kind of things, put on your best clothes. And she says, and put on your cloak and go down to the threshing floor, but do not make yourself known to the man until he's finished eating and drinking. So he's going to work all day threshing the wheat. Then he's going to sit down at the end, look over the harvest and be happy. And he's going to eat a meal, and he's going to drink his drink for the night, and he's going to be in a great place. And so it says then that's the moment of opportunity. Verse 4, and this is again where it maybe is kind of unusual for us in our situation. But when he lies down, observe the place where he lies. Now, if you have all of your harvest in one spot, you're going to be there to protect it. And odds are, whoever's helping you, they're not going to all go home that night and leave it out in the open. They're going to stay around. And so it's not one person. It's not like Boaz went to sleep in a room by himself. So you have to understand this in the culture that it's written. So look at the place where he lies. Then go uncover his feet and lie down, and he will tell you what to do. Now, here's where one of the passages gets a little bit interesting, because uncovering of a feet is not something that's part of our culture. In that culture, it was, in the word for feet there is described at another place in the Old Testament. Only one other time it's used as legs. But there are a lot of people who say that there's some kind of innuendo in this, and that she's to uncover more than that as an opening and see what he does with it. It's really hard to read that into this passage. You can do that, but it's really much more innocent than you would think. If you did know the situation, for us it might be innocent anyway, but I want to explain that as we go through, that this is really a much more innocent situation, and it's part of the Near Eastern culture. And so, he will, so go uncover his feet, lie down at his feet, and he'll tell you what to do. So she replied, all that you say I will do. And then verse 6 is her obedience. So she went down to the threshing floor and did as her mother-in-law had commanded her. In verse 7, when Boaz had eaten and drunk, and his heart was merry. See, that's the thing that we're waiting for the opportune time, okay, to present yourself. He went to lie down at the end of the heap of grain. Again, maybe you're headed out to the spot where you're going to lie down. The fence area, the place at the end of so that if the thieves were to approach from that area, you're at the end of it, and you could stop them from coming in and stealing your harvest. So he had a particular spot where he went to sleep at the end of the heap of grain, and she came softly and uncovered his feet and lay down. At midnight, that meant he fell asleep. So when she uncovered his feet, he didn't notice at that time. And how long had it been? We really don't know. At midnight, the man was startled and turned over. And behold, a woman was laying at his feet. So this is an unexpected thing. What are you doing here? And he says, who are you? Okay, because he doesn't at that point recognize who is at his feet. And so he's a man of honor. She has proven to be a woman of honor. What's going on here? And she answers, I am Ruth, your servant. And then she says, spread your wings over your servant, for you are a redeemer. Okay, several things going on here. And this is where words matter. spread your wings over me is directly related to his quote from chapter 2. In chapter 2, she has gained favor. We talked about favor last week. She gained favor with him, and she said, "You have offered me protection. I appreciate that. You've taken care of my needs. Thank you." And he said, well, basically we serve a God who offers protection for all of us, and it is under his wings that you have sought refuge. That's the word, under his wings, under the wings of God. So she said, thank you, and he says, thank God. In this passage, when she says, cover me with your wings, she's basically saying, you be my provider under God. Yes, God provides, but he often looks for individuals through whom to protect, through whom to provide, and she's saying, won't you be that for me? This is an odd way of saying, will you marry me? But she's saying, you are a kinsman redeemer. You are a person in line who could redeem me based on the fact that my husband is gone, and you're somebody in that. Now, that meant that she understood the whole idea of kinsman redeemer. He understood the kinsman redeemer. We understand Boaz understanding kinsman redeemer because he's in the line. She's a foreigner, which means that if she understands kinsman redeemer, then Naomi taught her, and it's to add value to Ruth at this point, to understand all the Jewish customs, all of the Jewish signs and things that they pointed to. And it's really an important passage. Now, she does not say, you are my kinsman redeemer, because that decision has not yet been made. She says, you are a kinsman redeemer. And so we have to look at those words and be very careful with what we say in that moment. And then she waits for the response. Now, if he is a man of noble character, she's a woman of noble character. They're both honorable people. And she wants to find the right time to express that in a way that he can say no or yes, but she doesn't know. This is the opportunity that Naomi has suggested is the best opportunity. They're in some ways alone, but not really. There's an opportunity for him to take advantage of the situation. He could go in a totally different way and accost her in the way that he had been protecting people from doing in the past. But Naomi thought he'll do the honorable thing. And Naomi thought that he would reward then Ruth for doing the honorable thing. And so let's see where this ends up. Now, part of this we're going to see this week, and part of it is not going to get resolved to next week, because we see the introduction of something brand new. And so let's read on. Verse 10, he said, this is Boaz, may you be blessed by the Lord, my daughter. So what he has done here is conveyed to her familyhood. When she came back from, you remember when they were in Moab? And so you could have said daughter-in-law. When Naomi was talking about Ruth, she called her daughter. That was an idea that you are indeed family. Even though you're a foreigner and our technical connection, meaning my son, is gone, there's no legal marriage there connecting us anymore. What's left? And so Naomi says, you're my daughter, okay? What Boaz does is offer the same, okay, I'm not going to throw you away because you're a foreigner, which was a big deal back in those days. There are times in our lives when this has been a bigger deal in America, but it is a big deal for somebody of one nationality to marry another in all kinds of cultures at all kinds of different times. I'm not saying whether it should or should not be. What I'm saying is that it has cultural issues attached to it, not just the same old, same old. And what he does in calling my daughter is not say daughterhood, but it's to say you're part of this family as patriarch. One way or the other, you're going to be a part of this family. And he says, you have made this last kindness greater than the first. So he's telling Ruth that she's been complimentary of him and kind to him, in that you have not gone after young men, whether poor or rich. So what Boaz recognizes is that Ruth, in a new culture, could have just gone out and tried to get married. And yet she wants to honor the faith, which is the process of kinsman redeemer. In addition to that, Boaz is recognizing that even as kinsman redeemer, there are other people that she could have gone after that weren't as old as Boaz. Now, this is the first opportunity we get to understand that there's an age difference. And so what he says is, verse 11, and this is important, my daughter, do not fear. Why do you have to tell somebody not to be afraid? Because there's tons of reasons to be afraid. If he had gone out and said, oh, this woman is at my feet, she's not so honorable after all, he could have even taken advantage of her and they would have believed him and not her. They would have believed him when he said he didn't do it, and her would not have believed her when she said that that's what happened. So there's tons of reasons. She would have been ruined. She might as well have gone back to Moab. Her reputation at that point, she wouldn't have gotten any husband anywhere, period. And so he didn't do the right thing. And so he says, then do not fear, because he's going to do the right thing at the right time. So nobility and honor go hand in hand. He says, I will do all that you ask, for all my fellow townsmen know that you are a worthy woman. He says that, I'm going to redeem you because you've done the right thing at the right time. Her being faithful to Naomi was part of it, but her being faithful to go out into the field and work hard at the time when if she'd had a husband, the husband would have been working hard. She took her fate. We talked about in chapter 1 how negative and dreary and awful all that time was. She took that in stride. She just did it. She did the right thing, even though things were going poorly. Things are getting ready to go a lot better. Okay? But at this point, and so he says, and now, okay, this is a twist. Verse 12 is a twist. And now it is true that I am a redeemer, yet there is a redeemer nearer than I. Okay, so what he's saying is, yes, I'm in line to be the kinsman redeemer. But in this situation, there's somebody closer than I. Okay, so it could have been instead of second cousin, first cousin or something. I can't remember exactly all the details to who was next. And what would happen is the kinsman redeemer would have an opportunity not only to marry the person and then have children with them that belonged to the previous mate, but also inherit all their land. So there was more at stake. There was property and having children at stake. And what Boaz recognizes is that there's a complication in him doing it. Now, he's flattered that Ruth would come to him and suggest that. But he says, I'm going to do this in the right way. And what we're going to do is we're going to go to the person who is next in line, and we're going to see if that's something that they're interested in. Verse 13, he says, remain tonight and in the morning. If he will redeem you, good, let him do it, but if he will not, then as the Lord lives. That's a way of making an oath. If you are bringing the name of the Lord into this conversation, you better not do it in vain. So he's committing with all that he has and all that he is. He says, I will redeem you. As the Lord lives, I will, if he hasn't. So he says, lay down until morning. Now, she begins to see a complication, but she lays down until morning, but arose before one could recognize another, so still dark outside. And before everybody could see, hey, Ruth spent the night, right? Because then again, the character would be bad. He says, let it, talks to all of the other people. She's getting ready to take off, and he says, let it not be known that the woman came to the threshing floor. So he tells all of the people that are there, and there are people there. That's important context. Don't say anything. She's here, but don't say anything because we're going to work this out. You'll see in just a minute where we work this out. And so he says to one of his servants, probably, he says to Ruth, bring the garment you're wearing and hold it out. Usually that would have been a sash of some kind, a secondary, they wore inner garments and outer garments. So basically she held it up like a big sheet or a big towel. And he measured out 6 measures of barley and put it on her. So what he's saying to her is, I'm in the process of taking care of you. And what would normally happen in a situation where there was an arrangement of marriage is that the person would give a dowry of some kind or a gift to the parents for working that out in his favor. And he says, 6 measures of barley, and then she went to the city. And when she came to her mother-in-law, she said, and this is interesting too, when the English translates Hebrew or Greek into English, it has a couple of options. It can translate literally the words of Hebrew, which sometimes we don't understand because it was saying one thing really means something different. We can get confused. Or it can say, what did it mean? And it can put that in there. So when it says, how did you fare, my daughter? The phrase in Hebrew is exactly that. It means that. But the phrase literally is, who are you, daughter? And in my mind, the question she's asking is, how did you do with Boaz? Obviously, you didn't come back in the middle of the night. Obviously, you didn't come back empty-handed. She's carrying 6 measures of barley, which the commentary I read about this suggested that he measured out exactly how much she could carry. 6 instead of 7 was, she could carry 6, but probably not 7. Or that's maybe how many she had been carrying before. And so but we really don't know the measure of that measure. When she's asking, how do you fare, my daughter? I think she's really saying, whose are you? Did something significant happen? Do you still belong to me and I'm taking care of you? Or is Boaz going to be the kinsman redeemer? Whose are you? Our question is, when Jesus redeems us, is whose are we? When Jesus does something self-sacrificial for us, to go to the cross for our sins, to be our kinsman redeemer, to be all of what Boaz and the kinsman redeemer process foreshadowed, the question at that point is, whose are we anymore? Are we not then a child of the King? Do we not cease to be the pauper and beggar that we were before Jesus redeemed us? Lost in our own sin, in a horrible and dire predicament, do we not become children of the living King, sons and daughters of our grand patriarch for taking care of us? So there's so many layers of meaning in this. Anyway, let me reread 16 because I got off topic a little bit. So when she came to her mother-in-law, she said, "How did you fare, my daughter?" Which meant, tell me everything. She told her all that the man had done for her, saying, in verse 17, "These measures of barley he gave to me, for he said to me, you must not go back empty-handed to your mother-in-law." Okay, so he knew the way that things were done, and he said, let me go ahead and make an effort to show that. And so he's following through on his requirement. Now he had it because of the harvest. And then those are the last words of Ruth. We still got another chapter to go, and Ruth doesn't speak again. It becomes evident that we make the effort to the point we can, and then God takes over and he fights for us. Ruth is in a much better place at this point at the end of chapter 3, even though it's not worked out yet. Legally, the situation has not been fixed. That happens in chapter 4. But at this point, she realized, even in chapter 3, she has to put herself out there. She has to go with faith. Wait. Put yourself in this position where it may go very badly, but wait in faith. And at that point, God took over and worked everything else out. See, we think we have to put in a lot of effort to get things done on our own. We really don't. Our effort is based on increasing our faith to put us at the right point at the right time. And at that point, God takes over for us. And he fights on our behalf. And we don't have to do anything anymore. Maybe we have to be faithful like she was, our simple obedience. Naomi said, go do this, and Ruth went out and did it. Boom, that's the way this story unfolded. And her great faith was rewarded. And that's a typical pattern for how it happens for us. So then Naomi said, wait, my daughter, again, the familyhood, until you learn how the matter turns out, for the man will not rest, but will settle the matter today. Now, she knew Boaz enough to say, if Boaz committed to this, it seems like maybe he's favorable to you. But we still have to wait and see if this other person works out. Now, why not go to the other person first? Well, you have to understand, Naomi had been gone for a long time, but not that long. She still knew when she returned to Bethlehem who were the people that were related to her husband. And it seems to me fitting that she understood that one would do the right thing and one would not do the right thing. That the person next in line was unlikely to do, and the person who was the following person would be Boaz. And we see this pattern unveiled. He would do what he was supposed to. In our own paths, our own journeys of faith, I wonder if people look at us and know, is that a person who will follow through and do what they're supposed to, or is that a person who won't? That's a good question. I wonder if we know about ourselves. When God calls us to be faithful and to be selfless towards another, what does that look like? Where do we go with that? I wanted to read just this one more thing. It was in a commentary of sorts from what I was reading to get ready for this. But it says, the Redeemer, the kinsman Redeemer, forfeits his own inheritance rights in order to continue the line of the dead. The Redeemer is a foreshadowing of Jesus, who laid down his glory in order to bring us sinners back from the dead. The redeeming process was to take a dead brother and bring his name back from the dead and bring his line back from the dead. And it says that Jesus did that for us spiritually and physically so that we might inherit eternal life with the Father. This is everything This is the gospel of Ruth, right? One cannot teach this concept without extolling the radically generous, self-denying, sacrificial, loving kindness of Jesus Christ. Wow. What a great passage to go through on our way into Easter Sunday morning. I hope this Bible study finds you doing well. We have some study questions at the end of this that you can go through and dig a little deeper if you'd like to. Encourage you to do that. But until the next week, I will see you later. And God bless you. And I hope that everything goes well for you this week. And then you enjoy a great and valuable Easter worship celebration. God bless you.